Good morning, everybody, and thank you for that wonderful welcome this morning. I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders of the lands from which we are all joining. I'm on Wurundjeri country and extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. My name's Russ Vickery, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the LGBTIQ representative on the Victorian Government's Victim Survivor Advisory Council, or VSAC. Through VSAC, the voices of lived experience are centred in the Victorian family violence sector, and for the first time, LGBTIQ voices are part of this. I'm humbled and honoured to fill this role. Most LGBTIQ people's relationships are respectful, loving, and worth celebrating. But some of our relationships are based on power, control, fear, and abuse. I know this all too well because, of course, I myself am a survivor of physical, emotional, and psychological abuse in a gay relationship. Usually when I'm asked to speak in my role as VSAC rep or get on stage with my show, My Other Closet, the Cabaret, I tell the story of what went on in that abusive relationship. I've since been told that in many ways, My Other Closet is a prevention project, as its message is that everyone deserves to feel safe and to love and to be loved without fear. Many of you will have heard my story before. And if you haven't or would like to hear more, head to my website, myotherclosetthecabaret.com. Today, I'd like to talk about what it's been like sharing my story and the importance of including LGBTIQ lived experiences in the family violence work. I'm grateful to the generations of LGBTIQ people who have fought for our rights and equity, and as well as the generations of feminists whose fight has gained the ground on which the family violence sector is built. It's the coming together of these efforts that enables a role like mine to exist. I feel both humbled and privileged to fill this role as I strive to ultimately represent and honour the many LGBTIQ victims of family violence whose voices will never get heard. As I speak today, I am only one of a handful of LGBTIQ voices sharing their stories in Australia. As far as I know, I'm the only LGBTIQ person in Australia who has been given the formal recognition and amazing support and respect that VSAC provides. I recently had the honour of speaking at the opening of Pride in Prevention, which talks about the drivers of violence affecting LGBTIQ communities. Pride in Prevention talks about how society does not recognise our identities, relationships, and families, and the discrimination and violence we experience. This silence and stigma means that most people don't know that family violence happens to LGBTIQ people, and we even struggle to recognise that ourselves. Some of you may have heard me speak about when I tried to find help to escape my relationship. I was so desperate that I finally reached out to a service for support, but was told we don't have the capacity to deal with people with your lifestyle. Instead of support, I was dismissed. I felt like my experience, my story, was worthless. I felt like I was worthless. Talking here today, I think about that phone call And I wonder how different life would have been for me and my children if that person taking the call had valued me, believed me, and helped me receive the support I needed. I could have endured many, many less physical injuries and maybe avoided enough emotional abuse that I would never have ended up in a place where taking my own life seemed to be the only escape. Since becoming the LGBTIQ representative on VSAC, I've spoken with many people in my communities who have had very similar experiences. They tell me stories about how the system and society don't believe them or want to help them. And I'm left wondering how many of these stories, unlike mine, don't have a happy ending. When I first joined VSAC, I wasn't sure where my story would fit in. I felt nervous about walking into that room as the only LGBTIQ person there. I was welcomed to the council by Rosie Batty, who acknowledged the importance of an LGBTIQ voice on the council and who has been one of my strongest supporters. Working alongside the amazing women who form VSAC helped me realise how closely aligned our experiences were. The moment when I truly felt like I belonged was when they all said the same about me and my story. Each VSAC member has their own unique experience of family violence. There is an enormous amount of camaraderie between us. We believe that no one's experience is more or less valuable than any other's. Each of us contributes to empowering each other, and sometimes the similarities in our stories are uncanny. As mentioned, I had the opportunity to share my story on ABC's You Can't Ask That, on an episode about family violence. I was the only man and the only LGBTIQ person amongst 7 women. Thankfully, I was filmed alongside Geraldine Bilston. Since then, we've become close friends and allies, and this year, Geraldine joined VSAC and became Deputy Chair. I think there is a wider lesson to be learnt from our experience, and with her permission and blessing, I'm going to read you a quote from her. I remember it made me nervous when the producer told me I would be seated next to a male victim for filming. I was quite surprised to meet Russell and his husband outside the studio. I hadn't considered that the male would be a gay male, or really even considered that abuse could even happen in gay relationships. I remember then feeling curious about how we would interact, but confused about how our stories would align or if they would have anything in common. It took us 3 hours of taping, and if you watch the episode, you can see my genuine reaction of awe and camaraderie on the camera. Russ and I shared so much similarity through our experiences. It really affected me deeply. On reflection, I better realised that it was not simply me being female that had made me vulnerable to domestic abuse. Connecting with Russ helped me see that it could happen to anyone of any gender. This helped me better see that it was not my fault or the fault of my gender, but that the fault always lies with the perpetrator who chooses to use violence. And the same goes for Russ and for all victim survivors, regardless of gender and sexual orientation. This is the camaraderie I felt. Thanks, Geraldine, I felt that too. An issue behind closed doors can never be addressed until it's talked about more openly and met with understanding and empathy. It has never ceased to amaze me how many audience members have come forward at the end of my cabaret show who were experiencing or had experienced family violence. Many of them told me that hearing my story and the reactions of the audience had helped them realize that they weren't alone and that they mattered. Most of these people were women. My experience of family violence was the worst time in my life. My advocacy has been the light out of the darkness, and I used my story to help others find their way and to support service systems to do better to meet our needs. Now it's time to give all stories like mine a new ending by changing the beginning. How? By preventing it before it happens. I'm just one person telling one story from one perspective. And there are many other stories that need to be told and need to be heard. I believe that listening to LGBTIQ lived experience benefits everybody in society. Rigid gender norms hurt all of us. Simply by living our true selves, LGBTIQ people already challenge these ideas. We need to listen to more LGBTIQ stories to improve our services and to enrich the work of preventing family violence. To make this happen, we need your help in breaking down the barriers that prevent us from doing so. We need your help to challenge the silence and the stigma that stand in our way. Working together, we can create a society where people of all bodies, genders, and sexualities can live free from violence. Thank you.